Well, I think at 5 past, we can kick off so we don't waste anyone's time. So first of all, I'm Dom and I'm a government economist. I've recently joined the Young Fabian Economy and Finance Network as vice chair. I'll do a quick plug to the network, that it's both enjoyable but a serious network. But we offer lots of great events, and also this year the opportunity to contribute to pamphlet writing and things like that. Amavir and Chris are co-chairs, so reach out to them if you're interested in finding out more about the network. I've put my own contact details there, mainly because they're new accounts and I'm lacking followers. But anyway, if you want to reach out to me, feel free as well. So let's kick off. Welcome to the session on behavioural economics, hosted jointly by the Young Fabians Economy and Finance Network, but also in collaboration with the Young Fabians Academy. And Toby on the call as well is your contact for more information there. A few caveats before I begin. First of all, this is being recorded, and so turn your cameras and mics off if you don't want to be seen or heard. Feel free to write in the chat if you have a question. Although this is on behavioural economics, which might be fairly niche, I think a lot of the topics we talk about are more about behavioural science in general, and so there's quite a lot of crossover. I will warn you that there's some audience participation, so please feel free to get involved. There'll be a few games which have worked out when I've done this presentation in the past, but as it's a live session, we know things don't always work out perfectly. A few more. This is pitched at a beginner's level to behavioural economics. I saw on the invite list some people had PhDs in behavioural science, so this might be a little bit below your level. But I'm glad you joined because you can help me out with the answering questions which I can't answer. And although I am an economist by background, I don't have any practical work experience doing behavioural economics. So I have in the past been asked some extremely specific questions, which I might be able to answer, but I might refer you to Google if I can't answer them. An important caveat as a government economist that all the information here is found free and online, and I haven't nicked it from the Behavioural Insights team in the Cabinet Office or whatever. Finally, although I did mention that you can message in the chat, I'm very poor at looking at it. Sometimes it's non-existent while looking at it. So if I do miss anything you say, either shout out or wait at the end when we're doing a Q&A, and I'll be able to look at your questions properly then. So let's get on with it. Behavioural economics nudging towards better policy making. So what is behavioural economics, and what are we going to be going over today? Well, why is it relevant? Why is it increasingly relevant? How can we make better policy, which I think is the most important thing at Fabians, and by incorporating behavioural thinking. We're going to be touching on nudges. I think a few of you may have heard of that term before. It's probably the most famous aspect of behavioural economics. We'll also touch on biases, heuristics. We'll do some experimental economics, which is where the games come in, and we'll talk about designing behavioural policy. And the main thing is, what can Fabians learn from, if anything, from behavioural economics? So what is it? Well, it combines a series of disciplines, psychology, economics and neuroscience, to better understand why we make the decisions we do and how we can make better, more informed decisions. It complements conventional economics to improve overall economic theory. Sort of conventional economics talks of perfectly rational people who always make the optimal decisions and are solely focused on maximising their own utility. Well, behavioural economics is a challenge to that. If we better understand our behaviour, then we're obviously in a better position to change it. And that's not changing it just for you and I, but it's businesses and governments as well. So this slide is sort of a history or an evolution of behavioural economics. We're not going to go into the details of each and every one of these things, mainly due to time constraints, but we will touch on most of these aspects throughout the presentation. We've said what it is, but what is it not? I think it's quite an important distinction. It's not just about controlling people's behaviour, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. Again, as we've mentioned, it's not to replace conventional economics, it's to complement it. It also has sort of a wide-ranging political acceptance from the Obama administration in America to Cameron over here. So behavioural economics is, I think, I did read something that's completely liberal or whatever, but there's plenty of political acceptance around it. And it's not only about irrationality. So I think that's the classic argument that people are rational, people are not rational. We'll get into more about why that isn't a sensible argument, and that the more detail that behavioural economics has. Why is it important? Again, we've sort of touched on most of these, but we need to better understand our own behaviour and other people's behaviour, so we can make better decisions and they can make better decisions. For us, we can make better policy. It's helpful, and more importantly, more cost-effective and efficient policy. Now, although I think the previous slide said that the start of behavioural economics, some of the concepts we use now were in the late 50s. It is a relatively new subject, with it really, I would say, getting kicked off in the last 10, 20 years. It's being applied to so many different things. I think the OECD estimate that there's over 200 behavioural insight units across the globe now. People are winning Nobel Prizes for it. They're becoming best-selling authors. It's a really interesting, important part of economic theory. So I've got just a huge range of behavioural concepts there. I'll leave it for a few seconds if there's any that jump out. You can quickly Google them. If you want the slides, message me and I can send them through to you. But what can Fabians be aware of? Well, I've highlighted a few there, but really it's all of them. The classic ones, groupthink. I quite like sunk cost fallacy. So the idea that we put energy, money, resources into doing something, and even though it looks maybe like the outcomes and the outputs that we once thought it would achieve may not be the case, but we still do it anyway because we put all of that energy into it. An example might be high speed 2. Would high speed 2 go ahead now if it was a new idea? Potentially not. The other one I quite like here is the Cobra effect on unintended consequences. So this stems from British rule in India, where we didn't like but the British didn't like the deadly cobras around the place, so they put a bounty on people who would kill the cobras. Well, what happened? People started breeding them and then killing them, and then getting the money for supposedly killing the wild ones. Well, Britain cottoned onto this. They stopped the scheme, and then what did people do? They released the cobras back into the wild. So they ended up being more than there originally was. Let's talk a little bit more about some more behavioural examples that you may be aware of. Herding and overconfidence. So could you apply that to asset price bubbles, maybe recent Bitcoin things, financial crisis before? Status quo bias. I think this is a fairly well-known one. Changing from an opt-in to an opt-out organ donation system. So now you have to, or in lots of countries, you have to say, don't want to give my organs away when I die, rather than saying that you do, and this has really helped the shortfall in organs for people who need organ transplants. Framing. So I've got one example here of the wording of parking fines. So it used to say the fines are £40, and say £40, and in 2 weeks it will double to £80 if you don't pay. Well, if you reverse that and say the fine is £80, but if you pay within 2 weeks, it's reduced to £40, more people end up paying because they feel it's a saving, and so they pay up quickly. Information salience. So I've got the example here of the removal of physical tax discs. So I know we're young Fabians, we should all be able to remember that previously at the front of your car you had a tax disc to let you know when you should renew your tax. Well, we wanted to be modern in the UK and switched it to an online system. Well, actually, it turned out that there was a shortfall in registering and taxing your cars, because people had lost their daily reminder to tax their car. Now, lots of people, when I've done this before, have said, yeah, but you get letters all the time. Well, some people might ignore them or deliberately pretend that they haven't seen them. Present bias. So people prefer £100 today. So if I was going to be generous and say, here's £100, or you can have £110 next month, most people go, I want the £100 today. They can do something with it, they can save it, invest it, or they just want it now. Interesting that if you sort of elongated that timescale, so I said I'll give you £100, but not for a year, or £110 in a year and a month, most people go, oh, I might as well just wait, because you've already invested such a long time, you might as well wait an extra month. I think this is quite an important one, number 6, the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And one might assume that you add them up for total motivation. Whereas if you look at an example of people donating blood in America, and I think Germany as well, they pay people to donate blood. In the UK, we don't. And so there's interesting research on what system works well, because if you pay someone for donating blood, does their intrinsic motivation, their sense of feeling good about doing that thing, that might reduce, and so the overall motivation to donate blood might reduce as well. Number 7 is anchoring, and I've got coffee sizes as an example. So if you like your coffee, you go into Starbucks and you see a small, well, let's not use Starbucks, they don't pay their tax to them, but a generic coffee shop, and you see a small, medium and large, and you go, well, I can't have the large, I'll be buzzing all over the office, I can't do that, but small's ridiculous, I've had a late night, I'm tired, so I'll just go bang for the middle. Well, these coffee shops, they're very canny. They go, well, I'll introduce an extra large coffee as well. Now, before there was a clear middle of the medium, whereas now we've shifted the middle to between the medium and the large. So suddenly the large doesn't seem so big anymore. And so people buy the large, the more expensive large coffee more often. Scarcity bias. So if you go on booking.com or any of these sites, it says the hotel has been booked a gazillion times in the last minute, and you must buy to get the offer immediately. And we panic. We go, yes, we must get that deal. But the Competition and Markets Authority, I think, have banned this, or are planning to ban this. And you can understand why. So we can see that behavioural economics can both influence positive and negative behaviours. So nudges, like I said at the start, I think this is probably the most well-known aspect of behavioural economics. So what is it? Well, it's a technique to influence behaviour quickly, easily and cheaply, but crucially without reducing the number of choices available. So Richard Thaler, who coined the term nudge, talks of a non-enforced compliance, sort of paternalistic liberalism, if you will. So a soft nudge might be about changing what's called the choice architecture, or just the environment, the way choices are presented. So maybe if you're in a school canteen, putting the apples and the healthy food at eyesight, and the Kit Kats and what have you way away from children's eyes. Next point is quite an interesting one about when a nudge becomes a shove, and whether that leads to Big Brother. So it's now the case in the UK that the maximum stake on a single fixed odd betting terminal is just £2 each go. It used to be £100. So that's more of a stricter nudge. The other one that I've got there is the sugar tax being a hard nudge. Now, a lot of people say to me, well, how can a tax be a nudge? Which I also semi-agree with, but the Behavioural Insights team came up with it, and they say it's a nudge, and so that's good enough for me. It's an incentive to stop buying your full-fat, full-sugar Coca-Cola and go for the diet version. The other ones that I like on there are the paper towel positioning in toilets, where we don't want to cut down the rainforest, so we don't want to use paper towels. So if we hide them, if they're way out of the way, people just shake their hands off rather than use paper towels. And the other one that I like there is about kayaking for free if you pick up litter. I think that was the case in Denmark, that you could go along and kayak for free in the river if you went and picked up people's bottles which they'd thrown in the river. So here's another list of nudges. You've got a couple of ones about getting people to walk up the escalators rather than walk up the stairs, sorry, rather than up the escalators. In the previous example, they didn't just have a running track, but they had a piano playing. It was in Sweden, and you, as soon as you stepped on the stair, it played a song. Would have got quite annoying for me, but at least it's trying to incentivize people to walk rather than be lazy. The middle, did you see free beer? Did you see free Wi-Fi? Great beer. That's a good one. The one that I question a little bit there is the one at sort of the bottom right, or central bottom, that's got the zebra crossing. It seems rather dangerous to me. But they're all pilots. This is the point we can speak about it going forward. That you have to test these things, but interesting nonetheless. So this is where the fun starts, and we're going to start with some experimental economics. So I need one volunteer, if possible. And I can't see the chat actually at this, so if you're comfortable to shout, please do.
Happy to do it if I don't have to. Oh, we've already got someone.
Who was that? Is that Tasmin?
Tamsin,
Tamsin, sorry, Tamsin. Great. Okay. They're not difficult, so don't worry. Okay, so let's see the first one. So you were in a shop, and good day. Let's say it's a top is £20 in Next, which you're in at the moment. You have a quick look on your phone and see that down the road in, I don't know, another shop is £10, but you've got to walk 15 minutes there. Would you walk there, or would you pay the £20?
I think I know where this is going, and I think I'd pay the £20.
Oh right, okay. Well, we might.
Oh, sorry, no, I wouldn't. I'd walk 15 minutes.
Well, it doesn't matter. Let's see. If you walk for the first one, let's see for the second. So this time you're going to treat yourself. It's £200 and it's a coat. Right. You look at your phone again and you see it's £190 in another shop 15 minutes away. Would you walk there as well? You said you'd walk for the first one. Are you more likely, less likely to walk for this one?
I think I'd be less likely.
Yeah, and this is what we find that in many cases that people would walk to the shop 15 minutes away in the first example, but either wouldn't in the second, or are much less likely to. And you know, you could argue that makes sense because you're saving a bigger percentage in scenario 1 than scenario 2, but the absolute figure, the saving of £10, is the same in both. In conventional economic theory, would go to £10 saving for both, you would behave in exactly the same way. But it turns out that we don't. Thanks, Tamsin. We'll move on to the second example, which we'll do as a group. It's more of a thought exercise. Let's say I had tickets to Oasis or Beyonce, and I got them for £100. Would I sell them for more than I'd be willing to buy? Now, most people would. Maybe I'd sell them for £200. I wouldn't have bought them for £200. That's ridiculous. But why would we do this? It's because we value something we own more than when we don't have it. And so this applies to lots of things. There's an experiment I think about just boring mugs, and you value the mug more when you own it to when you want to actually buy one.
Disturb you, sir. Can you please explain me the scenario first and second again? I was unable to get it.
So did you say scenario 1 and 2?
Yes, sir. Question one.
Okay, so the argument in the scenario 1 is that it's a £10 saving for the good, and most people go, yeah, that's quite good because it's a 50% discount. In the second example, because the percentage discount is less, people are less likely to exhibit the same behaviour of going to walk to the shop to get it cheaper, even though the absolute value is the same. So you're saving £10 in both examples. And economic theory will go, well, it's saving £10, you behave in exactly the same way. But what is found is that people are more likely to walk and get the cheaper one in scenario 1 compared to scenario 2, where they just go, so it's £200, it's quite a lot of money, I can't be asked to walk, to save £10.
Okay, thank you so much. I thought in different way. I thought that you have you have knowledge about that it is getting in £10. I mean, I'm to say that there is confirmation bias, that we know that we already know that it is getting a £10. I think that I think in that way.
But that in many ways that's an interesting point, because people don't behave in the same way. People think about things in different ways. People do things at different times, and that's completely normal. That's the whole point. Human behaviour is not uniform. And so there's lots of examples. I just get is
okay.
What was found in research for that. Okay, let's move on to a game. And again, I need some volunteers, but I need 2 this time. Again, it's not hard. I need someone to be a proposer and a acceptor or rejector. So I need 2 volunteers.
I'll do it if you like. Happy to join in.
Robin.
I'll join as well.
I don't mind. Oh.
Okay. Oh no, it's all right. You can go. You can go.
Who did you
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind. Julia speaking.
Okay, Julia. Okay, so Robin, you're going to be the proposer, and Julia, you're going to be the acceptor or rejector. Okay, so Robin, I'm feeling extremely generous, and I'm going to give you £100. Okay. However, I need you to split it with Julia in any way you see fit. Okay. Julia does not have a say at all in the split, but you must split it in some way. So, how much money would you give Julia?
I would give her £50.
£50. Okay. Let's park that thought for 1 second and move on to the ultimatum game with the same participants. So Robin, I'm going to give you another £100. It's been a very expensive evening for me. And again, you're going to have to split it with Julia. But this time, Julia has to either accept or reject what is given to her. If she accepts, you both go home happy with whatever split you suggested. If Julia rejects, you both go home with nothing. I can save some money. So in this scenario, how much would you give Julia?
I would do £50 again.
£50 again. Okay. Julia, would you accept or reject £50?
I think that was very generous of Robin and very fair. So yeah, that's an accept from me. Thanks for the 50 quid.
Okay, so I want to know, Robin, why didn't you give Julia £1?
That just didn't seem fair because I haven't earned it. I've just been given it. So
Julia, what would be the minimum that you would have accepted in that game?
I don't know. I kind of, in some ways, I think I'd want it to be fair and be 50-50. But in other ways, I think it's free money. So probably like a tenner.
Excellent. So, why would you not have even accepted £1, Julia?
I don't know. That sounds like
That's a bit
not very much. Yeah, it's a bit mean.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we find, that people want to be generous, they want to be fair, but again, conventional economic theory goes, free money is free money. I don't care whether I'm given 50p, a pound, or 1p. It's more money than I had originally. Let's not complain. Okay, but people often give generous splits. In fact, in the previous time I did it, someone said they give 60 odd quid, which
that's a bit crazy.
yes, which I was surprised with. But anyway, that's basically the point, that fairness and altruism are really at play here, and people don't behave in the way that classical economics would suggest. And again, if you played the same game again, but this time with the roles reversed, what you did in your previous game would also have affected it. Whether you know the person would have affected it as well. Whereas again, economic theory goes, if you do it for one person, you do it for anyone else. Cool. Thank you very much for that. I think that's the end of the audience participation, which may please people. No, it's not. I've got one more slide on it, which we can go through fairly quickly again. There are 2 or 3 examples here. So I need another volunteer if possible.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Kamar from India. Greeting. Yeah.
Nice to speak to you, Emma. Here's your first scenario. You were given the choice of either a 60% chance of winning £50 and a 40% chance of losing £50, or you go, no, I don't want any of that, I'm not going to bet. So I don't do any sort of paper calculations here, but what would you do based on that to start with? Quick fire, Emma.
Yeah. I will be. Do you know? I will bet because I am given 60% chance of winning that $50. But
excellent.
The answer will be that A1, because I'm getting 60% chance of winning that $50. Sorry, pound.
Excellent. Okay, and park that thought for a second. And now this scenario. Again, don't do too many paper calculations. I know there's quite a lot of numbers on the board here, but either a 25% chance of losing £6,000 and a 75% chance of losing nothing, or a different bet where you've got a 25% chance of losing £4,000, 25% chance of losing 2, and a 50% chance of losing nothing. So again, quick fire, what would you do here?
So I can go for with probability we can say that is central nothing. C
See,
option that will be better.
so the good news is that you're consistent in your behaviour. That what you do for bets which are low and bets which are high are the same. So you chose A and C. Often what we find is that people choose A because they're risk loving at low bets where there's low amounts of money involved, but are risk averse in high bets. Okay.
Yeah, I'm risk averse.
Let's do a second example with either a new person or the same. Amar, if you want to continue, or a new person if not.
Are you talking to me, Cunning?
Yeah, do you want to continue?
Yeah.
Okay, so this time, gosh, it has been an expensive night for me. A certain win of £250 or a 25% chance of winning £1,000 and a 75% chance of winning nothing.
So it will be certainly A. Because I'm certain about my winning. That is it is there's 100% chance that I'm going to win that I will get that amount.
Exactly. And then this example, which is a certain loss of £750 or a 75% chance of losing £1,000 and a 25% chance of losing nothing.
D that D will be answered D. Because in case of D, because that there is a loss of that total amount, but in case of D, there is something probability that some amount will be getting.
See, in the first example, you were consistent. In the second, you weren't, and that's what we see. That when faced with a loss, we tend to be risk-seeking, so we're going to gamble even more. But when faced with a win, as you said, the guaranteed £250, we don't bet anymore. We just go, yeah, that's fine. That sounds good to me. When faced with a loss, we don't like losses. We gamble even more. And this goes on to the principle of prospect theory, and that we dislike losses more than we like equivalent gains. So if I was to give you £100, you might be X happy. But if I was to nick your purse and take £100 off you, you'd be even more frustrated relative to happiness if you were to be given £50. Okay, now let's move on to the designing of behavioural policy. We're not going to, again, go into too much detail of this because it tends to be quite dry. But one framework which is used is the EAST framework. So interventions must be easy, attractive, social, and timely. And we'll talk about the Behavioural Insights team in a sec. And they came up with this framework, I believe, and use it to this day when designing policy. Another example is the Combi Model: capability, opportunity, motivation, behaviour. And according to the Combi Model, in order to exhibit a desired behaviour, an individual must have the capability of doing it, motivation to do it, and external factors must provide the individual with an opportunity to exhibit that behaviour that is wanted. Again, we won't go into too much detail on this model. I never know where to put this, but it's always good to have a correlation, doesn't it? Causation in there somewhere. It might be the fact or the case that increasing your consumption of mozzarella cheese helps you get a civil engineering doctorate, but I suspect it doesn't. And the point of this is that humans see trends and patterns and are then inclined to gather information which supports that pre-existing view. So you might look at that and go, that makes sense. So let's go and try and find more evidence to prove that's the case, confirmation bias. So I've got there, we often confuse coincidence with correlation and correlation with causality. I also got another example there of that I like, of the number of Facebook active Facebook users driving the yield on 10-year Greek government bonds, or I suspect not. Okay, so this is from a company called BE Works, and they're a consultant over in Canada and America. I mean, they come up with these sort of questions when developing policy. We won't go through them all, but why are we intervening? Is one strategy needed? Multiple strategies? When to use them? Are we being scientific? Are we actually using research and data? Are we testing things? Are we trying to influence individuals or society as a whole? And a classic one for us in policy making, what would happen if there was no intervention, no behavioural intervention? What would the counterfactual be? And then I've put together there my slightly less sophisticated questions, which I think is useful whenever we are making policy, is, has the policy been reviewed from a behavioural lens? If it has, does the policy actually meet any behavioural criteria? And then if it has, have we tested it? Does it work? A few caveats then. Just because we can impact people's decisions, obviously doesn't mean that we should. All our interventions must be evidence-based, must use data. Bang on about it quite a lot, but it must be tested. And we'll have an example on the next slide, a few slides time, as to why testing is important. And the next bullet point is really important, that many challenges are too complex to reasonably expect one-shot interventions to change behaviour. Okay, so we spoke earlier about nudges needing to be easy, cost-effective, and what have you. But most challenges are too complex to rely solely on behavioural economics and behavioural science. So let's give an example on testing from the Behavioural Insights team, which used to be in the Cabinet Office and now are part owned by the Cabinet Office and part owned by either a company or a charity. I think the idea is to save or to be independent, also to help other governments, not just the UK government. So here's an example on organ donor registration before the opt-in, opt-out system. So they tested 8 different messages on the website. There's 4 shown there. You've got the control group number 1, which just says, please join the organ donor register. You've got 3, which says, every day thousands of people who see this page decide to register, and you've got a picture of a diverse group of people. Number 5 says 3 people die every day because there's not enough organ donors. It's a morbid one. Then number 7 says, if you needed an organ transplant, would you have one? If so, please help. So I'll give you a few seconds to think what one worked best out of those 4, and reveal the answer in a sec. So if you look there, number 3, with a diverse group of people, did even worse than the control. Sort of worried, but that's why we do test it. You might have thought before that might have helped. You can see 5 and 7 had the biggest impact. That's 7 the most so. And that one was about reciprocity. Wasn't it? Spoke about positive reciprocity early on when Robin and Julia were doing their game. People want to be treated fairly by everyone in society. And if one person does something nice, someone will do something nice for them. Okay, well, I thought it'd be remiss to ignore COVID and all of this stuff. So let's go through some of the behavioural insights which have been at play during COVID. And of course, this is not all of them, just part of them. Some of the nudges and insights here, of course, only play a part. Behavioural economics can't solve things by itself. In this case, more stringent measures were needed. In other words, our countless lockdowns that we've had. Here's 8, and I'm going to rattle through them. The first one was that early on in the pandemic, there was concern, and I think from the government side, that an early lockdown would lead to behavioural fatigue and people stop following the advice. And there was a letter sent to the government by many behavioural scientists saying there's been no research, there's been no evidence that this is true. Now, I think that at least all of last year, most people were pretty well behaved. I know myself now that I'm getting pretty tired. What about the shops with arrows and floor signs to mark where you need to go and where you need to stand between people? Number 3, I'm not sure I've seen this in the UK, but one-way traffic on pavements to avoid people crossing paths. Is that a reasonable idea if there's walkways? Everyone likes the happy birthday, singing happy birthday every time they wash their hands. To make sure we're doing it for long enough, I think we need to sing it twice. What about placing hand sanitizer in shop entrances? It's a really simple thing to do, but people are quite absent-minded. They forget. They need something within easy reach. Number 6 is really important. That messaging, signalling, communications has been really important throughout the pandemic, and they've learned not to be overly negative. Otherwise, people give up. It's the worst thing ever. You know, no end in sight. People just go, oh, I can't. That's too much. Whereas if you're serious, you get a balance between being serious, but not overly negative. It helps, and I think even David Attenborough today or recently said about some of his recent programs that they've been potentially too negative, showing all the destruction. Well, what about just showing the one and the beauty of the natural world? So getting that balancing act right is important. Hard nudges, so fines or the prospect of fines, and then recency effect. We may be seeing this with the polling for the government at the moment, with the success from vaccines that the NHS and so forth have rolled out really effectively, and people forget the things in the past which didn't go so well. So people are absent-minded and need reminders of it. We need to combat at the moment vaccine hesitancy and reinforce social norms. So we're influenced with how other people behave. So if I'm going to do something, someone might follow me. I don't know why, but then someone else follows and so forth. There's a couple of other examples I quite like. That I believe in Tel Aviv, you can go to a bar and get a free drink if you go and get your jab, which is an excellent incentive in my book. Here's some more biases which we'll go through. I know we've not got too much time, so I'll be quick. I think this might be one of the last few slides. Overconfidence bias, so underestimating the risk of the virus, at least at the start of the pandemic. I think I might have to hold my hands up to this one. I'd certainly think most people didn't realise it would get as bad as it did. Zero risk bias. I like this one. People want some certainty in uncertain times. So let's use an example of toilet rolls. So some people might have bought hundreds of toilet rolls because they go, well, I want for certain to not run out of any toilet rolls. So that might be good for them. Is that good for all of society? Is it irrational to do that though? If someone's really risk averse, maybe not. Status quo bias again. I found this tricky as well. Whenever I see someone, I always want to shake their hands and what have you. Whereas we're not allowed to do that anymore. Loss aversion. People don't like losses. We spoke about that earlier. People don't like not being able to do what they want. Ostrich effect. Burying your head in the sand, pretending that things just haven't changed. Hindsight bias. Let's again talk about lockdowns. I think lots of people might quite rightly say that they thought it should have been a week or maybe a month earlier, but many months earlier, probably not. Number 7 is relevant to us as policymakers or policy thinkers. One model thinking bias, so we just think that one solution is fine. too focused on one of the solutions. We know the world's complex. There's rarely one solution, and also we can't forget about all of the other important things which are going on. Herding, again, toilet roll example. We might need some, so that's sort of bad herding. Well, what about vaccine herding? We need some of that for herding. Myopia, we're short-sighted. Again, this links to some of the other ones we've spoken about. That we thought that the crisis would be over pretty quickly, within 12 weeks, I think I heard someone say. Number 10, altruism and self-sacrifice. So let's leave on a positive one, that most of us here are below the median age of COVID death, which I believe is 83. So we have had to sacrifice a lot of stuff to keep other people safe. So we've done well in this pandemic. We should be aware of that and pleased with our efforts and continued efforts, I should add. So what about the future of behavioural economics? Well, Richard Thaler said, I hope in 50 years that behavioural economics will cease to exist. Once economic advisors and ministers just be behaviourally informed. In other words, a future where behavioural economics becomes integral in the policymakers and ministers' minds in their approach to solve complex problems, not just an afterthought. Okay, and with 9 minutes to go, are there any questions? And thanks for listening.
Hello, thank you for this wonderful lecture on economics. I am a scholar from India. So I have a question regarding one thing that what I have seen in this COVID period, basically in Indian context, or I can say in the global context also, that despite of lockdown and all the things, there was surge in stock prices. Okay, there was surge in stock prices. And what I found the reason that there was a high flow of FDI and FPI, like foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment. But how it is possible that there was there was lockdown and all the things for 6 months or 5th month, and the entire world was locked down. But in spite of that, there was surge in there was a rise in stock prices, because this was kind of bubble. This was kind of a kind of puzzle for me that I was unable to explain to my students that how it happened.
Well, I like you struggle to appreciate why stock prices and stock indices are as high as they are now anywhere, actually all overpriced. Is your question about India in particular and the stock prices there, or is it in general?
In general, that how behavioral economics that play a role here. That since there was no any kind of business happening between, you can say between investors, but which biases that play a role in that
Well,
during
again,
COVID?
we spoke, I think, earlier about the overconfidence bias, thinking that things will get better. I also think that if you look at the stock price, and I haven't seen for a while, but in April they weren't doing very well, and so they rebounded quite a lot from there. And I think there's always this optimism that companies, especially big companies and ones with more infrastructure, can bounce back more quickly, and so that might be a reason for stock pricing increasing. Personally, I think it's more because bond incentive to buy bonds is much lower because the yield interest rates on them are far less, and so what's the opportunity cost? Well, if interest rates go down, then you might as well invest in stocks instead. So I think it's maybe an overconfidence thing, but I think it might, in more practical terms, be because bonds yield less than they did at the start of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. So there is one question that basically, do you know, it is a cultural practice in India, that dowry system, that when they is married, when the daughter get married, a huge amount of wealth is given to her. But do you know the government has started many schemes, various programs, and they do know there's various kind of schemes and programs started, but still it is it is persistent and it is on a rising level in India.
It's more so that's sort of a cultural thing, isn't it? That it's hard to people like. I think I can use status quo bias for that one, and say people don't like change and they like the way they've behaved in the past and the history and the culture associated with that. So that might be okay. Any more?
Is there any solution in terms of behavioral economics?
What's that? Sorry, Emma? Any further questions before we head off? I'm excited for the Champions League in 5 minutes, so if there aren't any more, we can leave.
Dominic, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you can see it. I can read it for you.
Yes, please.
It says, it's from Daniel. He says, which of the biases discussed today do you think is the most influential to our behaviour?
Thank you for reading. Unfortunately, it cut out, so you're going to have to ask it again. It was the most influential.
Which biases discussed today do you think is the most influential to our behaviour?
Oh, I don't want to do a cop-out answer here, but I genuinely don't think you can associate one bias or one behavioural concept as being the most important or the worst or whatever in all scenarios. I really don't think you can do that. I would say that probably for us, the groupthink and the overconfidence is probably the main drivers of poor policy. And so in that context, I think that's probably the most useful to be aware of, but I wouldn't want to associate one exact bias there. And I can actually see the chat now, which is helpful. Very good.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dominic. I had a question.
Yeah.
What would be some pitfalls and limitations of the field of behavioral economics going forward?
Ironically, an over-reliance on it to solve problems. So I've banged on about behavioural economics being the solution to conventional economics and to policy making, that it's always an afterthought and it should be incorporated from the get-go. But I think there's a tendency for then you to go that it's always the solution all of the time, and that's never the case. I think so. I think that probably is my answer to that.
All right, thanks.
Is that everything? Thanks, Amar. I've done this 3 times now, so I'm getting better. Maybe I should charge next time. See how only fewer people come. Is that it? Super. I will enjoy the Champions League. Thank you. Like I say, thanks for attending, everyone, and I appreciate it. Feel free to. Oh, my thing's frozen, but feel free to add me on anything, and happy to discuss this going forward. So cheers and speak soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Dom.